If you have your Bibles, if you'll turn to Matthew chapter 14 with me, I want to, preaching is for our remembrance. That's what preaching is. A lot of us have read the Bible. Maybe you've read the Bible all the way through. Maybe you've been in church your whole life. You've heard sermons. So why are you still going? You know, if you've read your whole Bible and you've heard sermons, the story that I'm going to preach on today, you've probably heard the sermon multiple times. So why do you keep going to church? Because we need that reminder. Life gets busy sometimes, and we need that reminder. Life gets hectic, and we just need to be brought back into focus, and that's what preaching does. It directs us right back to where we're supposed to be looking. In a Christian life, we could use those reminders. I know I could use those reminders. You just need to remember God's still in control. You can trust Him, and everything's okay. The picture that hangs on the wall here behind me, we put this thing up years ago, and it has so much significance to so many different people. It screams relationship above anything else. That picture right there. You look at that, you know the story in the Bible that's from. You know what that picture means to you in your life, because I'm telling you, you've never been to the point where you were walking on water and God reaches down and grabs you. That didn't happen to you. If it did, well, that's super cool, but I don't think it did. But that picture does mean something to you, because there was a time in your life where that happened to you in a different kind of scenario. Everyone sees it and applies it a different way, even though we know the story. Well, as I was looking at that picture, I walked through the hall. Sometimes I have to pace because I can't sit for a long period of time. That makes studying fun. You know, when you need to sit there at your computer and study and you just can't sit, so you move around. As I was moving around this week, I looked into the auditorium and I saw this from a totally different perspective, and that's what triggered the thought for this sermon today. With that perspective in mind, I went back to my office and I started looking at the Christianity that is taking place in third world countries. This is how my brain works. I see that picture, I'm like, you know what, I should check on the third world countries. Isn't that what you see? You know, you look at that picture and you're like, third world countries, that's what I need to think of. That's how my brain works. But there was a segue there in my own mind, and I thought, I'm going to go look at that. There's a freedom that most American Christians will never experience, and Christians in third world countries already seem to understand it. They already seem to get it, and we don't seem to understand it at all. And it's the freedom that exists when God is seen for who He really is. Because in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, all the blessings, land of prosperity, we have all the things. Somehow we miss this, and they have got it locked in. There are Christians in third world countries who share a single bowl of rice with their family in a day, and that's all they eat. Their houses are made out of materials that we throw away. Just let that sink in for a second. Some of their houses are made out of materials that we throw away. Amazon brings our treasures, and we throw their building materials in the trash. That's the level we're at in this country. We take that cardboard and we throw it out, and they're like, man, I could have really used some new cardboard for my house. They wait to see which family member is going to die next because of sickness or the lack of medical supplies, and that's just life over there. That's just Christians in a lot of these third world countries. These same Christians see death's door more often than we do, and they are some of the most thankful people on the planet. Look into it sometime. Look at Christianity in these other countries, and you're like, man, they seem to be singing and dancing a lot, and it's Tuesday. What's going on over there? That's a freedom that most Americans lack. We are an anxious people in this country. We have got so much anxiety built up in our communities. These people see poverty, disease, and death as simple facts of life, and they wonder why we are so burdened when things don't go our way, when we are of the top 2% of the wealthiest people on the earth. They look at us like, what are your problems? Well, you know, we know we're going to bury our children. There's a good chance we're going to bury our children. And that's just life for us. We know that they're going to suffer, that they won't be able to lay down on their back because of tumors or whatever, and we just try to keep them comfortable, and that's life. We know the life expectancy is short. Life is really short. What are your problems over there? What are you dealing with over there in America? What are you suffering with? Something's wrong. Something is seriously wrong with this picture. This morning I wanted to introduce this liberty that most people in Western culture are missing. We just don't get it. And I want to give everyone a new perspective for when our circumstances take a negative turn in our lives. And they do. By the way, bad things happen in this country too. It's not all blessings. We understand that bad things happen here too. So I want to change the perspective because it's healthy to change the perspective on this. In Matthew 14, Jesus has just finished preaching to and feeding over 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. We're familiar with the story. He gets done feeding them, and now it's time for him and the disciples to move on. They've got to get on with their journey. So let's pick up in verse 22 of Matthew 14. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on a mountain by himself to pray. Now, when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Jesus sends his disciples out so he can have some one-on-one time with God. He goes to pray. He's just found out that his cousin John the Baptist was beheaded. By the way, that's quite a bit of information before you're about to feed 5,000 people. But he gets hit with this news that his cousin John the Baptist has just been beheaded, and Jesus has got a lot on his mind. And yes, he's blessing people and he's taking care of people even though that news is there. But when it's over, he says, hey, you guys go ahead and go. I just need some time alone. So Jesus goes over here to pray. Well, they get on the boat and start crossing the sea. While he's praying, a storm rises up, and the disciples are out in the middle of the sea trying to stay alive because the storm is big. And by the way, we can't look at them and go, you wimpy guys. No, they're in a fishing boat. Let's not diminish this. They're not in this rock solid vessel. You know, everybody get down in the submarine. It's going to be fine. Well, let's ride the storm out. No, they're in a fishing boat, okay, out in the Sea of Galilee, and the storm rises up, and these guys are just trying to see if they can see tomorrow. They just want to know if they're going to be alive, and that would be a freaky thing. After Jesus is done praying, he decides to meet up with them, which one of the coolest stories in the Bible. By the way, it's not just a story, it's history. This really did happen, and people say, well, that's impossible. That's why it's called a miracle. That's why that's defined. It's only something God can do. That would be a miracle, but this did happen. Look at verse 25. Now in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a ghost. And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I. Do not be afraid. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, that's this 4th watch of the night, 3 to 6 o'clock in the morning, Jesus decides to catch up with the disciples. You know, they went on ahead, I'll catch up to them. But he catches up to them by walking on the water. Now, let's not lose the fact that it's also during a storm. Okay, so it's not just, hey, there's a guy walking on the water. No, he might be going up and down. I don't know. He's walking on waves, okay? This is rocky water here. So Jesus decides to meet up with them. It says that when they see Jesus, they freak out. And by the way, I think we're going to have to let them slide on this one. You would have freaked out too, okay? If you were to go out into the middle of an ocean today, in the middle of a storm, knowing this story, we know this story, and you see somebody walking on the water towards you in the middle of that storm at 3 o'clock in the morning today, there's a good possibility, even though you know this story, you're going to freak out. I'm going to freak out. Like, hey, there's a human walking on the water in the middle of a storm at me. You mean like Jesus was walking on the water? I don't care about that story right now. I'm just freaked out. That is not natural. That's not right. So we're going to have to let him slide on this one. We would have freaked out too. Jesus calms them down by letting them know it's him. But Peter, of course, needs to investigate the matter a little bit more, because that's Peter. I need to look deeper into this, because Peter wasn't the guy that says, hey, that's enough information. I always need more information. So he needs to look into it a little closer. Look at verse 28. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. So he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Peter had one of those I'll try anything once kind of personalities. It might be stupid, but I'll try anything once. He calls out to Jesus and he says, if it is you, invite me to come out there. And Jesus says, come. And Peter's like, well, there's all the evidence I need. I'm going to need more than that. Anybody can say that word. You're like, well, he did say come, so it must be him, right? So Peter's like, oh, well, there's my invitation. This must be good enough. So Peter gets out of the boat. Jesus invites him to come out he steps out of a boat in the middle of a storm. Try to put yourself in this situation. You don't step out of a boat in the storm. By the way, kids, don't try this at home. It's not wise, okay? Don't step out of a boat during the storm. But Peter steps out of this boat, and the water supports him, and he starts walking to Jesus. He's experiencing something that no other person in all of history would ever experience. He's walking on the water with Jesus. The only guy in all of history that would do this. He's walking on the water with Jesus. And that would have been a really amazing moment. That would have been some cool stuff to see. Whether you were Peter who was walking on the water, or you were just one of the other disciples sitting in the boat watching Peter walk on the water, which, by the way, would be the one I would pick. I'll be the guy in the boat. I just want to see it. I don't have to walk. It would be a cool thing to see. And that was an amazing gift that Peter received that he would remember for the rest of his life. But unfortunately, he was about to add another detail to that memory. He's walking on the water towards Jesus, and he's going to elevate the experience a little bit more. Verse 30. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God. Peter is walking on a storm. He's walking on the water with Jesus, and he starts looking around at the view that he has. What a beautiful view. I'm out here, there's nothing under me except for a lot of water. All around me there's wind, there's waves, probably thunder and lightning, stuff like that. And he starts looking at the circumstances that he's in, and logic starts screaming at him. Logic is a loud thing, by the way. It starts screaming at him. Couple messages that logic starts screaming. Water can't support you, Peter. It can't support you. The storm is big enough to kill you. And one last thing, you're not able to do this. That's logic. That's logic. And logic makes a good point here. All three of these things are true. That's right. I can't do this. Logically, that makes sense. Logic makes a good point. Peter listens to the logic and he starts to sink. And Jesus reaches out and pulls him back to the top. And then Jesus asks him just this one little question. O you of little logic, why did you doubt? That's not what he said. That is not what he said. He said, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? Peter had all the logic he needed. And it was good logic. It was really good logic. Oh, that's right, I can't do this. That's logic. He had all the logic he needed. What he was lacking was faith. But why did Jesus say he had a little faith? I mean, it would take a lot of faith to get me to step out of a perfectly good boat in the middle of a storm, okay? That's going to take some faith on my part. So I look at this and why did you say that to Peter? Because I'm saying that would take more faith than I had. I'm not stepping out of a perfectly good boat. I'm hanging on to the boat. That boat is my best friend. I'm not doing this. What Jesus was stating is that Peter didn't have a lot of faith in Christ yet. His faith was still little, but it was growing. It was growing. All Peter was focused on in that moment was logic. That's what he was focused on. I'm not able to do this. This storm is big enough to kill me. These are two good points. Logic is making a good case here, and I'm going to freak out. My next move is complete panic mode. And that's what he did. He goes into panic mode. Peter looked at logic, and not a lot of things are making sense in that moment for him. When we don't have a good understanding of how things work, we're often left with guesswork. If you don't understand how it works, that's what you're left with is guesswork. And when it comes to God, it works the same way. Let me give you a good example of what I'm talking about. God has no beginning, and God has no end. Okay? We know that's just true. God has no beginning and no end. Everything we know in life has a beginning and has an end. It all starts somewhere. What does that mean to you? Just stop and comprehend it just for a minute, or try to comprehend it. God has no beginning. All right, lock that into logic, makes sense. No beginning. He never started. So trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions upon trillions of years before creation, God was there. And then trillions of years before that, God was there. Now let's mix it up a little bit more. He also created time. So how long was he there before he created anything? No time at all. But he was still there. Can you grasp that? Because I can't grasp that. I can't understand that. It's difficult to wrap our minds around something that's outside of our understanding. It's hard for us to do that. Just because something seems logical to us doesn't always make it right. Because I've had a lot of things in my life where I'm like, this would be logical, but it doesn't make it right. So often our relationship with God only grows within the parameters of our understanding of God. That's it. I understand him this far. We put him in a box. We end up putting God in a box. Whether we mean to or not, we end up putting God in a box. To step outside of those parameters are terrifying. Go ahead, get out of your boat. Step out of the boat. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. Peter was crazy. Oh, I'm just going to give that to him. He wins that award. You were out of your mind, sir. That was a good boat. And you got out of this thing. So to step out of the parameters of our understanding is a scary thing to do. That would mean that we'd have to trust him where circumstances say not to. And that's terrifying. But when it's hard to let God have that kind of control, what we have is a problem. When you can't let God have that kind of control in your life, you're the one with the problem. He doesn't have a problem because he's able to do all things. So we end up with a problem when we just can't say, well, God, I can't turn that one over to you quite yet. Oh, you have a little faith. Right? But it doesn't make sense. He gets that. There's not a lot of logic in this. I get it. But I want you to step out of that box that you put me in and understand that I'm out here too. Sometimes to us, it seems like God is so much bigger than our problems, and sometimes our problems seem so much bigger than our God. And that's just the reality. To turn it over to him seems illogical. I mean, we should know what's best for our lives, right? After all, it is our life. You've been around you since the day you were born. You know you. You know your life. You know what makes sense to you. You know what's logical. You know all of that stuff that works for your life. And to trust him, I mean, you should be the one that knows best for your life, right? And to turn that decision over to somebody else, that's not logic. That's not logical. We talk all the time about relationship in this church. We talk all the time about our relationship with God. And then we go through struggles and wonder what God's up to. Like, what are you doing, God? What are you doing? And what are we doing in that moment? We're questioning his character. God, I don't know about what you're doing here. I don't like it. We haven't talked about this. If we would have talked about this, I wouldn't have chosen this path. What are you doing, God? What's going on with you? When things don't go our way, when it seems logical that God would do something specific in our lives and he doesn't, we tend to get hurt and we often walk away from church. People do that. I don't want anything to do with God now. I'm upset because he allowed this. I'm upset because he did that. I'm upset because of his choices. Why didn't he let me just have my choices? I would have never picked that for myself. And why do we get hurt? Why do we get mad? Because the water isn't holding us up anymore. Our circumstances aren't what we want them to be. The water was supposed to support us, and it's not doing that anymore. Everything was just fine when I was walking on the circumstances. Everything was just fine when I was walking on the water, and then everything changed. And when the water doesn't hold us up, we question the character of God, and our relationship with him gets complicated. Like, God, I don't know if I can trust you. What did I do? You know what you could have done, and you didn't do it. So now I question your character. I question what you're up to, because things didn't turn out the way I thought they should. So my question isn't about what I would have chosen. My question is about what you chose. And I just don't know that I can trust you right now. So let's go back to the basics for just a minute. And somebody in here might be going through this right now, where you're going through a trial. You're like, God, there's a lot happening here, and I don't know what to do with this, and I don't know that I can really trust you. So let's go ahead and step back and look at the basics just for a few minutes. Look at Jeremiah chapter 32 and verse 27. It says, behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is there anything too hard for me? Now let's try our hardest to answer this question here. Is there anything too hard for God? Anybody know the answer to that one? These are going to be easy, by the way. I'm just throwing this test out to everybody. These are going to be simple. Is there anything too hard for God? No. Lock that one in. God can do all things, right? There's nothing too hard for him. Let's try another one. Job chapter 34 and verse 12. Surely God will never do wickedly, nor will the Almighty pervert justice. God can do no wrong. True or false? He cannot do anything wrong. He's righteous. That means he will always do what's right. This is not something that's going to change. He's always going to do the right thing. Even when we can't understand what's going on, he will never do the wrong thing. He's always going to do wrong thing, or he's always going to do the right thing. So let's lock those two things in there. First of all, nothing's too hard for him. Second, he will never pervert justice nor do wickedly. He's never going to do anything wrong. Let's look at the third one. Romans chapter 8 and verse 38. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So here's the third question. Can anything separate us from God's love? No, it cannot happen. But what about those times when things don't seem to be going your way and you really don't feel loved in that moment? Because if he really loved you, wouldn't he have done better for you? Wouldn't he have done a little bit more to help you? Sometimes it feels like he's just walked away from you. I've been there. Like, hey, God, are you still there? Feel like I have a dropped call. Like we were talking just fine, and now it seems like you just left. Are you still there? Silence. God, I'm hurting right now, and I really need you to speak to me some way. Could you send somebody my way? I just need to hear from you. Silence. I've been there. By the way, God works in the silence. Because, you know how I know this? Because nothing can separate me from the love of God. He's not going to leave me nor forsake me. He's not going to do wrong. He cannot do wrong. And there's nothing too hard for him. I understand that. If we can never be separated from God's love, and there's nothing too hard for God, it's impossible for him to do anything wrong, then if God chooses to do something, it's because it was the right call, even though I don't understand it. Because just a minute ago, everybody was able to answer those three questions. Is there anything too hard for God? No. Can God do wrong? No. Absolutely not. Can anything separate you from the love of God? No. Then what about those times when you don't hear from him, You don't see him and you don't like what's going on. Are those three things still true? They are still true. We need to be able to trust in this rather than question his character. If he allows something in your life to happen, it was the right call. It was the right call, even though you don't like it. Even though you wouldn't have done it yourself, it's still the right call. We just need to seek him in it rather than looking for our own logic. We've got to understand this. We also need to understand that he's not causing everything. It's just the nature of a broken and fallen world. We have to understand this. We were offered an option. Let's have fellowship, or you can eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there will be a fallen world. You will see death. You will see suffering. You will see sin. So I'm asking you, can we have the relationship? Let's do that. Just stay away from the tree. And all of us, what did we do as humanity? We walked right over to the tree. And we ate of it. And people say all the time, well, that was Adam and Eve. I wouldn't have done that. Well, how'd you do the last time you were tempted to sin? How'd you do? Did you eat? Well, yeah. Then you would have done the same thing. We are weak. We need him. We're dependent on him. So we often stop trying to grow in our relationship with Christ when our circumstances crumble under our feet. A lot of times, what do we turn away from? God. We're going to walk away from him. And then we cry out for his help only when we get in over our heads. When do we cry out for God? When the circumstances are getting bad. It's all right, I'm not going back to God. I'm not going back to God. And then when it gets so bad, when you hit rock bottom, we start looking up. Like, hey, you still there? Yep. So you mind hooking a friend up? I could really use your help now. Like, where have you been? I've been mad at you, but I could really use your help now because it's gotten bad enough. When did Peter cry out for Jesus? When the water wasn't holding him up anymore. But there's a detail we miss when we read this story. There's a detail a lot of people miss when they read this story. There's a detail we miss when we see the negative rise up in our blessed lives. There's a detail we miss here. And here is what it is, and I really hope everybody grabs a hold of this. The water was never designed to hold you up. Now think of the character of water. It was never designed to hold you up. It was never made for that. The only reason that Peter was able to walk above the water was because of God's grace. The water wasn't ever holding Peter up. Jesus was holding Peter up. And then Peter decided to put all his eggs in the basket of logic instead of Jesus. And then he's like, I'm really disappointed, Jesus. The water isn't holding me up. Like, what did you think it was going to do? It was never designed to hold you up. And we miss this in this story. Here's the detail that we miss when we see God through eyes that have a lack of understanding. Our circumstances were never designed to hold us up. They were never designed for that. So when our circumstances aren't holding us up anymore, what do? I'm going to get mad at God. Why? The water's not supporting me. Like, really? Did you think it was going to? My circumstances aren't supporting me. Did you think they were supposed to? Well, yeah. That's what we thought. That's what we thought. The only reason we're able to walk above our circumstances is because of the grace of God. It's because you are blessed. It's because God is good. That's it. The circumstances didn't make your life better. God did. God makes our life worthwhile. He's the one that we get our value from, not our circumstances. God loves us so much. But sometimes when we put more faith in our circumstances than we do in Him, we end up running into a few hiccups. God knew Peter was going to sink, and He used that moment to help Peter grow. When Peter saw that he was sinking, he threw all logic out the window. But catch that part. Peter, you're sinking. I see that. I can see this. I'm sinking. What's the next logical move? Forget logic. That is why I'm sinking. I'm going to throw logic out the window. I don't need logic at the moment. I'm going to let that go. So he cries out to the one who is still able to stand on the water. By the way, that's not logical. I'm going to cry out to the one who's still able to stand on the water, which isn't supposed to be able to support a person at all. And he asked him to take him back up where only faith makes sense. Jesus, help me. What do you need? I need you to bring me up to where faith makes sense. Because logic is always a place where I sink. I sink in logic, and I can walk by faith. Could you bring me up to where faith makes sense? Peter lived the rest of his life introducing people to Jesus Christ. And even after Jesus went back to heaven, Peter continued to preach so that people could know that Jesus loved them. And he loved them enough to save their life too. He was later crucified upside down because he refused to stop pointing people to Jesus. Our understanding of God will always stay within the parameter of the box we put him in, unless we're willing to step outside of our understanding and trust him. Like, that doesn't make sense. I'm going to go there. I would rather walk on the water. Well, it doesn't make sense that you can walk on water. Yeah, but wouldn't it be really cool if we did anyway? I got to get out of logic, and I got to start walking by faith. God will always be a small God to us if we don't learn to stop putting so much stock in the circumstances that were never designed to support us. You can't walk on water. Everybody understand that? You can't walk on water. How are you supposed to walk on how are the circumstances supposed to support you? That's just life. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. And you think all of those circumstances are supposed to support you? Why do we put our logic there? I'm going to let everybody in on a little secret. I'm going to give you all a heads up here. Life is going to happen. By the way, you're not going to be able to stone me for being a false prophet because I think I got this one right. Life is going to happen. Sickness will come. Death is promised. Relationships fall apart. People betray each other. Money runs out. But then these things also happen. Babies are born. And people fall in love. Sicknesses are cured. Reconciliation happens sometimes. And sometimes money comes back. All of these things are just details of this thing we call life. But they were never designed to hold you up. It's just life. It was never designed to hold you up. These are just called circumstances. That's it. It's just circumstances, and a lot of them you don't cause. It just happens. Life happens to all of us. It comes at us all the time. All of the details of the character of God and the circumstances of life have been blended together and have made everything complicated. I see the character of God, but it needs to work with the character of life and circumstances. Let's put that together. Why isn't it pretty, God? Why isn't it pretty? There's logic and faith. You're placing both of those together and you're trusting in one more than the other. And of course, it doesn't look so nice. So go back to the basics. Let's just go back to the basics. We can never be separated from the love of God. There is nothing too hard for him, and he can do no wrong. Trust that. Trust that. But what if it gets hard? Nothing will ever separate you from the love of God. He can do all things, and he will not do wrong. But I don't like my circumstances. But what about the character of your God instead of the character of your circumstances? If we will trust in the fact that this is true, our faith will grow. I have flown in an airplane before. And chances are I'll end up doing it again. Not happily, but it's probably going to happen at some point in my life. I remember the first time I flew in an airplane. I was in the airport, I was looking out the window, planes were coming down out of the sky. And they were landing and everybody was safe. I'm like, I'm happy for those people. I haven't got into the airplane yet, but I'm happy for these people that have had a successful landing. You know, sometimes those planes are parked really close to the window as you're walking through the airport and you can look outside. I looked outside that airplane, I'm like, that is really heavy. I know that thing is really, really heavy. Like tons and tons and tons of weight. That's really, really heavy. And in my mind, it was an impossibility for that thing to be in the air. I don't understand how that works to this day. I understand the basics, but that's not enough. I don't understand how that plane is able to fly through the air. I still don't have an understanding exactly how planes work. I get the basic concept, and that's all. But it still shouldn't work in my head, okay? I see it, I'm like, yeah, it looks like that's working. But it shouldn't. Anytime now. I just don't see how it's going to work. I don't see why it is working. But now I have experience that says I can trust outside of my understanding because I have been on a plane and it did work. I went up and I came down safely, and I've done it more than once. And it works. Do I understand it? Absolutely not. Should it work? No. No. Will it work? No. And somehow it does. Somehow it does. I don't understand it to this day, but I do trust it. I do trust it. We may not always know what God's up to. But if we can remember those three things, nothing can separate you from the love of God. Nothing is too hard for him, and he can do nothing wrong. Those three things. Cash in on those three things. If we can keep these things in mind, it won't matter how high the circumstances rise or how rough the waters get. God is able to walk on the water. He was always able to walk on the water. Look at Proverbs 3:5. Good reminder. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. It's amazing but true that most people feel that our circumstances are supposed to support us. And they don't. And when they don't, they question God's character, not the character of the circumstances, but they question the character of God. Somehow we've forgotten that water isn't designed to hold us up, and we get disappointed when it doesn't. This is the freedom that the third world Christians possess. As I'm looking into this week, I'm like, wow, they have something we don't have. They understand that life is just life. But God is still God. In the middle of it all, we have a God who's willing to join us in the middle of it all. And God's still God. The problems that those people go through are problems that we thank God we don't have to go through. But the problems we go through are problems that they thank God they don't have to go through. The reason that they're so thankful that they don't have our problems and our prosperities is because of how it affects our view of God. And they vocalize that. I wouldn't want all those blessings. Why? Because look at what it does to their mind about God. They would rather always have a God who outweighs their problems than a God they can't trust to carry them. So keep bringing the problems. It's okay, because God remains the same. This is the freedom that American Christians are living without. So we have to ask ourselves a very important question. How do we respond when the water doesn't hold us up? What do we do when the circumstances aren't going our way? Let me show you the proper perspective for a child of God. Philippians chapter 4, verse 11. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Life happens, and God insists on happening in the middle of all of it. Nothing's too hard for him. He can do nothing wrong, and he will not leave you. You cannot be separated from the love of God. But the circumstances were never designed to hold you up. So place your trust in the one who can. It's actually simple. It's not complicated. It's not complicated at all. We serve a God who can walk on water. And I think I would rather place my faith in him than the character of the water.